my.
Now, did you want to start exactly at 2?
It doesn't have to be. I think it would be good if there's a few people present. I don't know how many participants we'll have, but if there's a few people anyway, it would be better to start.
Okay.
I can start talking about something at 2 and then get to the point once there's a few people. I mean,
whatever you're comfortable with.
Yeah. I just have to set up my screen here. Okay.
Take your.
And then I'm sharing. Okay, good. It's been such an interesting conference so far. I've been trying to listen in as much as I can, and it's been just so many great presentations and discussions. And
Yeah, there really are. My eyes are starting to hurt a little bit though.
It's a lot of Zoom for one day. Yeah. But it's so exciting to have so many people talking about these topics. I think this is something that I've been passionate about for a long time. And until recently, in most conferences, it's only been like a handful of people who've been interested. And it's been so much fun to see the energy kind of gathering around things like social justice and peace building. And
yeah, it's a lot more prevalent in this year's conference, which I really enjoy. The topics are so interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, and everybody's at different places along the way, and so it's you know, for some people this is a new thing, and that's great, and other people are already implementing their classrooms and want like the next level up. And so it's really fun. Okay. I think if we end up with more than like 10 participants in the group, I think it would be better to go into small groups for the activity that I have, because I think it'll be more useful to have the conversation than than to have the whole group. So I don't know if you have to give me permission to do that, or
you have permission.
You can do it. I have permission. Okay, excellent.
Not my permission, but the app's permission.
The Zoom permission, yes. Although your permission is appreciated too. Yeah.
Hello, James, Heidi.
Oh, I gotta get my gallery on here. I can
see names I recognize. Oh, your beard is looking really nice, James.
Thank you. Masks is forcing me to trim it on a regular basis now.
Well, I imagine outside next week we're okay, right? From next week we can take them off outside.
That's what the Prime Minister is saying.
Yeah.
Hello, Ibo Young. Welcome, Ibo Young and Sunny Yu.
Okay.
I imagine the beard is itchy with a mask.
Not as much as you'd think.
Huh.
I thought it would be too, but I think maybe I'm just used to wearing masks at this point every day.
Sometimes I feel strange when I don't have it. I feel like I'm forgetting something.
I feel it's so intimate now. Like when I see people's faces, I feel like, oh, it's so personal now.
This is what people look like.
Yeah. Okay, just a heads up to anybody who is not with your video on yet. If you want to participate in a couple of activities, that there is some visual part to it. But if you don't want to, it's totally fine. You can just observe anybody who has their video on. Yeah, but it's not a big thing, but it could be fun. So if you have the option to put your video on, I would encourage it. And if that's restricted right now, no worries. You can still see how it goes.
Welcome, BJ. Welcome, Tim. Welcome, Kim Yuju. All right, it is now 2 p.m. Cheryl, if you don't mind, this is an excellent time to start real-world English negotiation skills for intercultural conflict resolution. If I can hand it over to our presenter.
Great, thank you so much, Lucinda. So I'm really happy to be here today. I am sitting in my house in Seoul in Gwangjin-gu area. And it seems like a nice day outside, although I've been on the computer all day, like many of you. And I'm originally from Canada, from the province of Saskatchewan. And today I want to discuss and practice a little bit looking at intercultural conflict resolution and the role of negotiation. And I have to give a little disclaimer. I was supposed to have a co-presenter, which was kind of the point of the presentation, but she had to back out because of personal reasons. And our collaboration got interrupted by an extensive COVID quarantine. So anyway, we're going to still talk about it, but it'll be maybe a little bit different than what the abstract was proposing. So if you decide it's not for you and want to switch to something else in the middle, I totally understand that I'm not offended. But I still want to talk about intercultural conflict. Just to give you an idea of my background, I studied education and also peace studies, peace building, and conflict resolution, as well as TESOL. And so the intersection of these three areas is really my interest. And it's been exciting, as I was saying to Lucinda earlier, it's been exciting to see those three areas really coming together in this conference and so many great conversations about it. And one thing that I've been interested in is the use of language in negotiation, especially when we're working across cultures. And you can see this playing out in all kinds of fields on international levels and all of that. But it's really not just negotiation like for global peace, but it's also like the negotiation that happens on a daily basis. And in my language learning experiences, I have had numerous conflicts arise from negotiation gone wrong, simple negotiation like trying to order food at a certain restaurant or figuring out how to wash dishes. But also conflict is resolved through negotiation. So when there is conflict, any kind of problem that arises, whether that's a kind of minor level conflict or something more significant, it's negotiation that has to happen. It's usually the first thing that happens to try to resolve that. And so when we are teaching language, we really need to be looking at the situations where things are not going right. How do we use languages to mend that? How do we use languages to work through the negotiation situation to some kind of outcome that is great? The person that I was supposed to be presenting with today, her name is Barry Roberts, and she's based in California. I'll give her I'll point to her book and things later, but she has done a lot of work with negotiation because she's come at it from a legal perspective. She was a lawyer for many years and then took a career shift and started doing training for TESOL and looking at community mediation programs that she was involved with, and realized that there's a lot of overlap between the two fields. So right now she's working largely with law students in California who are coming to the LLM program there and doing some English training prior to that study or alongside that study, and doing mediation and negotiation training with them. To give you an idea of my teaching context currently, I'm also working with a lot of lawyers, people who are doing working with international companies based in Korea, and they are responsible for doing a lot of negotiation with clients and things in English as well. So that's kind of the context. But in my other teaching context, I've also seen that this kind of negotiation is necessary, negotiation that needs to resolve conflicts and also interpersonal conflicts, but also negotiation that can either escalate or de-escalate the situation as well. So I want to start today with a little exercise, and usually I do this in person, so this is the first time trying it online. We'll see if it works or not. If you want to participate in this, you'll need to have your video on. I haven't figured out how to do it without a video. So if there's a few people who could put their video on, you can turn it off again afterwards. Okay. And yeah, the original one, of course, is a little bit more interactive physically, but we're going to give this a try. So this is a kind of game, and there are some points. And the game goes like this. If you have to make your hand bounce like this 3 times. And on the 3rd time, you can choose which symbol you're going to make. You can do this one or this one or this one. Okay, so you have to like aim your hand so that you can see it in the video. And the point system is as on the screen. So if you choose this one and your partner chooses this one, you get 1 point. If you choose this one and your partner chooses this one, you get 2 points. And if you choose this one and your partner chooses this one, you get 3 points. So the goal is to get as many points as you can in 20 seconds. That's the goal. Okay, does everyone understand the instructions? Okay, so we're gonna have some partners. We have to partner up on the screen here. So maybe we can have, let's see, I'll pair you next to me on the screen where you are. So James and Melvin, Boyoung and John, Christopher and Tim, and Heidi and Lucinda. Oh, and I can go with Isoko. Isoko just joined with her video. Okay, so we'll get the timer up on the screen. And do you want to do a practice run just to see how it goes? If you can see the other person, okay? Okay.
Is this a cooperative? Like, are we tallying our points together with the partner, or are we competing with our partner?
You have to get as many points as possible in 20 seconds.
Okay.
Okay. So you have your symbol. Okay, ready? Did it work? Okay, this is a practice round.
Okay, so any other combination is no points?
Any other combination is no points. That's correct. Yeah. Yeah.
It is rock, paper, scissors. Thank you.
Okay, let's see.
So do
Okay,
we
everybody's
need
practiced
a
already?
rhythm?
Mhm. A rhythm, yeah. So Osoko and I are together here.
Yeah. 1,
You
2,
can just
3.
look at the person. Yeah.
Ah,
Okay.
Okay.
So don't worry about the other people on the screen. Maybe you can just focus on your partner. That is your partner. And then not worry about anyone else.
Oh.
Okay. All right. Have you figured it out for practicing? Is it working? More or less? Okay. All right. So we have 20 seconds on the clock. Ready, set, go.
1, 2, 3. Oh, sorry, I missed it. Okay, do it again. 1, 2, 3. Okay, no points. 1, 2, 3.
Okay, time's up. Time's up. All right. Okay, good job, everybody. Maybe you can put how many points you got in the chat. Let's see what the highest one is. If you type type how many points you got. 5. All right. 2, 3, possibly 1. I got 0. Maybe.
I'm not at all certain about my 5.
Okay, this obviously works better in person, but let's talk about a little bit about it. The exercise is designed. You notice that I didn't answer a lot of questions, right? About how your experience was. Let me see if I can get. Oh, sorry. The next one. Oh, back there. So some questions. So when we're working with peace education in classes, we're on conflict resolution classes, this kind of reflective practice, reflection on the activity is really important. So some questions like this could be something to reflect on if you do this activity with your students as well. And you can feel free to share. You can either put it in the chat or, yeah, maybe that's a good idea to put it in the chat. What did you learn from this activity? Did anything surprise you? This question, I think, is a good one. How did it feel in your body to do this activity? I don't know about you, but I was pretty tense trying to figure everything out and like looking at like that. What was the best way to get the most points? Did you get that far? Just doing it online maybe was hard enough. And then what role does culture play in the activity? So if you have any thoughts about it, you can maybe put your name in the chat, and then we can ask you to speak or raise your hand physically or something. So think about this activity. Okay, so Tim was rapidly trying to think if there was a most mutually beneficial combination. So you were strategizing already. How can we both get the most points? A win-win solution. That you can't count to 3 very well. Nice. Right, coordinating with the other person is not very easy. Like you can't like even align it online. And there might be something to learn about virtual negotiations with that as well. There might be some information there. Trying to figure out a way to coordinate with the limited amount of spatial and visual cues. Exactly, yeah. When we're online, the communication and the visual is much more difficult, definitely. Bouncing in time with someone else is hard, yeah. But that's kind of true in person. I mean, it works a little better, but it's even when you try it, it's hard, yeah. The timing with the partner was difficult, exactly. Trying to figure out the basic rule the whole time. Zoom is a big part of it. Definitely. How do you think your assumptions played into this? What role does culture play in this? I don't know if you noticed, but I never said this is rock, paper, scissors, right? That wasn't the instruction. I didn't say play rock, paper, scissors with each other. Did you think you were playing rock, paper, scissors? Was that an assumption that you had? Oh yeah, and if the internet speed varies, then it could be really different, definitely. Yeah. Rock, paper, scissors could be helpful or hurtful. Right, right. So in person, when I've done this activity, we've done it with holding hands and putting arms on the table and trying to get one side and the other side. So what many people assume is an arm wrestle. And there can be some of the similar kinds of coordination problems in person. Those generally are not as difficult as online. So this has been really great to see, because how much of communication is happening non-verbally when we are trying to coordinate with another person, even if we don't have much background together. So that's really insightful. So many times people, especially with students, they will try to compete right away, and the assumption is competing. But a few people try to collaborate right away because the instructions don't say you have to compete. You're not told to compete. This is just part of the assumption and the socialization that we take on. It's part of our culture, really, that competition is our go-to strategy in most situations. Okay, so thank you for experimenting with me. I appreciate the effort. Yeah, it's always fun to try something new on Zoom. So what we're talking about with negotiations, negotiation, like I said, it happens all the time. We're doing this all the time, every day. We're negotiating every aspect of interaction with other people on some level. And so what I'm talking about today and what we're talking about with students is generally interpersonal. But in conflict transformation, conflict resolution studies, we talk about conflict is a fractal. So basically the same pattern is repeated no matter how closely you look and how far away you look. So patterns of communication, patterns of emotional response, patterns of conflict escalation and de-escalation are similar, are fractal on interpersonal levels and larger levels. So the communication that we practice on the interpersonal level can be helpful for people who are working at larger scales as well. The idea is that negotiation is about understanding underlying interests and needs, and that the idea is that we're coming to an agreement that all parties can live with. I remember one class when we were doing an activity with negotiation, and the task was to plan a trip together that you would all go on together. And if you can agree on the itinerary, you and a family member can all go on this trip together, all expenses paid. So the group had to try to put together this itinerary that they would all agree with. And we got to the end, they finally agreed with it, and they said, yes, we did it. We got to an itinerary that we all, agreed on. And I said, great, I'm going to pay for you and your a family member to go on this trip. Are you going to go? And people said no. They said they don't really want to go on this trip. So it was quite interesting, because then we had a chance to talk about it. Like, why did you negotiate a trip that you don't really want to go on? And we found that so many people were compromising their positions for the sake of the group harmony, for the sake of getting to the end, that they actually weren't happy with the outcome at all. So was this a case of successful negotiation? Well, that really depends. And that's the part that's okay, I'll mention this part first. So we talked about conflict styles, and compromising is kind of what happened in that situation. So everybody kind of cut off about half of what they wanted and put in what they could, compromise, and then came out with a solution that was really not helpful. And so if you really want a solution that's helpful, the collaboration approach is really what's necessary in negotiation. Obviously, you have the other options as well with our exercise as well, that you could choose different options there. But we talked about in the group, like, what was the reason for the compromise? And the biggest thing they talked about was that they value their relationship as classmates, and they didn't want to make the other parties feel bad. They didn't want to make the other people feel bad. And they didn't have the language to communicate in more detail how they felt in a way that wouldn't offend the other person, that would get what they want while maintaining the relationship. And so basically they gave up because of the lack of capacity linguistically. So that was a very interesting experience. That made me think a lot about the aspects of principled negotiation, where this is basically from the Getting to Yes famous book by William Ury and Pratton, I think I have it on my, yeah, the idea that in principled negotiation, we have to separate people from the problem, focus on interest, not positions. We have to brainstorm lots of different options, and then we kind of create a criteria for choosing a standard. So this is what's taught a lot in negotiation. This is out of Harvard negotiation school. But the part that is a little bit difficult here is the focus on separating people from the problem. That could work in some contexts, but sometimes, depending on the cultural context, that's not actually possible. So the question of intercultural negotiation arises when we are not operating on the same assumptions. If we have the same assumptions and we have the same background information and the same relative goals, we can negotiate very quickly. Anybody can in any culture. But when we're coming from different backgrounds, even the definition of what the conflict is not in common. Even that there is a conflict has to be negotiated sometimes. So everything has to be negotiated, even the negotiating table, right? That there is a table or not a table. And part of this is neurological. Our brains are making predictions based on our experiences that are shaped by our culture. And so we jump to conclusions. That's how our brains function. We can't live in the world without doing that. And we jump to the closest conclusion because that's the easiest for our brain to make a decision about what's going on. But what it does is it really limits our capacity in intercultural situations to consider multiple options and to really find out what's going on, and find a way that we can actually have a trip that we would all like to go on together in the end. So I have another activity, and this one you can, another one that you can also use possibly in your teaching context, depending on where you are. And this is when we're teaching negotiation in language education context, it's helpful to kind of look at kind of one micro skill at a time and kind of pull it apart so that we're building on the skills and really focusing on language in each aspect of this. And this task in reality could be like a series of classes, not just a single kind of activity in a short period of time. But for the sake of illustration, we're going to try it today. And you can have a chance to reflect on like, where are the places we can like expand and work broader on this. The first one is I'm giving you a case study. The first step is you don't need to give people the case study. They can come up with the case study themselves and think of a conflict where there was culture involved. And that could be from a different language or a different country background, but it could be like a generational cultural difference or a family cultural difference, and get them to create a case study that has some elements of a critical incident where there is something that happened that's not clearly explained, but likely has something to do with culture or worldview or point of view, and be able to write it up in a narrative form. So I mean, you can see that there are several lessons, several classes worth of work there already. That could be very interesting in telling their stories and then putting that together in a written form. But for today, I'm going to give you this case study, and I'll just read it so everybody has a chance to hear it if you can't see it very clearly. So a friend invites Sarah to go out for dinner together on Thursday evening, and on Thursday morning it's raining. And her friend texts her saying, oh, since it'll be too hard for you to come out in the rain tonight, would you like to meet another time? But Sarah doesn't mind the rain. So she texts back, actually, I'm really looking forward to getting together. I don't mind the rain. And they meet that evening, but Sarah's friend seems, typo, distracted and says he has to go right after the meal. Sarah texts her friend the next day, but there's no response. So what's going on? When we're looking at this from principled negotiation perspective, first of all, we're looking at suspending judgment. We probably have immediate responses or ideas like, oh, her friend might be such a jerk, or she's totally clueless. She has no idea how communication works, or there could be some assumptions and judgments that we pick first of all. But the skill that is practiced in this exercise is really to suspend that judgment and reframe. Rebecca Oxford talked about reframing what's happening in this situation to expand our idea of what possibilities there could be. So we want to think of as many possible reasons as we can for what's going on. And then in the class, I would kind of gather them together on a Jamboard and be able to put them visually in a place where people could see them. And then try to categorize them and see, are there similar things that would be similar understandings of the situation that would be there? Then we would consider possible responses for each of those kinds of categories. What are the facts that we know? What are some of the emotions that we see that are present? What do we think are the needs that are there? And what are some possible solutions? So linguistically, there's a lot of stuff that can happen along the way. In one particular one, we really focused on conditionals, like if her friend feels like this and needs this, then Sarah could do this. So there's a lot of different patterns of language that can be supported in terms of templates and things like that. So what I'd like to have a chance to do is for you to talk about this in your in some smaller groups, to be able to have some conversations so that you can experience it for yourself. Do some of this brainstorming. If you'd like to use the Jamboard, the link is there, and I'll put it in the chat as well once you're in the small groups. And yeah, and talk about for yourselves, what do you think is happening in this situation, and what could be different responses, and then what could be different interpretations, reframing, and what could be possible responses to do. Okay. All right, let me just get the groups here. We have 3 or 4 per room. Okay. All right. So what time is it now? We have about 10 minutes or so, I think. Is it? We have 15 minutes left, right? So we want to have about, yeah, 7 to 10 minutes we can have as a group to kind of work through this. I think that should be enough. Sorry, I think I made a mistake. Woelk, did you want to be in a group or no?
No, not really.
Okay, okay.
Oh, sorry,
All right.
sorry about that. That must have
No
just gone
problem.
mixed up.
It's fine. It's fine if you don't want to be. I just thought, oh, maybe I missed up and did something wrong. No problem.
Sorry, I had to do some other stuff at the same time, so I'm sorry.
Totally understandable. No problem.
Okay, I'm gonna mute myself then.
Okay. I'll
But-
put the recording back on.
we
Welcome everyone
both
back.
are not so impatient, so we just get back to the main home.
No worries. I sometimes it's awkward the last 2 minutes if everybody's finished what you've had to say. So it's always fine to come back. Yeah. So I do want to plug Barry Roberts' little booklet, a book that she wrote. She has a resource in there, this Fen's chart, and she also like puts in some language templates for each part. So depending on your learners, they can do it themselves and kind of create those templates as a class, individually or as a class, or you can kind of provide them some kind of sentence starters to be able to talk about motions need solutions as well. Yeah. So chance to reflect. And so I think we're small enough. I think we can just talk about how the conversation went, or how this exercise was for you, what language it exercised, what you kind of thought about in terms of intercultural settings and negotiation, and especially if there's any ideas that this might apply in your context. Feel free to use the chat or to just like wave a hand or unmute yourself and speak.
Towards the end there, our group was talking about how this is really, I mean, we did discuss all the possible explanations for their conflict and what they might do and everything. We were also talking about how this kind of activity is really, really good in the classroom because you can apply a lot of different grammar structures to it as well, which is nice. The
the lesson in the textbook, if you already have a textbook that you're going with.
Yeah. So like I was thinking like should not, or I would do this, I would do that. The you know, the modals that would be really useful in this kind of class.
Right. Other thoughts on the reflection questions there, or other things? Maybe you want to share a little bit about your conversation.
You know, we know so little about Sarah's friend. We don't even know if this was an intercultural, an instance of cross-cultural misunderstanding. And if it is, then it points out to students that, hey, cross-cultural misunderstandings occur. It kind of shows how little we know, just given a limited amount of evidence.
Right, right.
And that may be useful for students to reflect on as well.
Yeah, and I've done this with when they have their own personal case studies, it gets a little bit more in depth. If they're using their own conflict that they've experienced, they know the situation a lot better. But the hard part with that is that their assumptions are a lot stronger because it's hard for them to get out of their context. So sometimes what I've done is got them to write their own case studies, but then to talk about a conflict, first of all, I tell them, I say this conflict is going to be shared with the other people in the class. We don't need to talk about it outside of this class, but the details of it will be talked about in the class. So pick something that you feel comfortable that we're discussing your situation. So that's kind of the first disclaimer. And then they write up their case studies and then we switch them. So they're not working with their own case study, they're working with their classmates' case study. And if they need more details, you know, they can ask the classmate and get more details, but it's often not necessary because when you're writing your own story, especially if it's a little bit longer, there's enough to go on for the purpose of the exercise. But yeah, that's right. Sometimes we just don't know, and we don't know in real life too. That's exactly true. Any other?
Oh, Lucinda's got something in chat.
Oh, I missed that. What prompt do you use for writing this case study? Okay, yeah, good question. Depending on the group, I often say like, if we're talking about like people who are different, or sometimes we're in a unit about like traveling or being like in other contexts, it can come up like this. So it depends on where we're starting from. Like if we're talking about like people who are different and focusing on like similarities and differences, then I would say like, think about a time where you had a disagreement or a problem came up between you and somebody who was different than you. Or I would say, think about, you know, if you were traveling and you met somebody from a different place, think about a problem that came up in that situation. And then I would prompt like use narrative. Usually before this, we've done some practice with using a narrative style of writing where you start with like setting the scene and then the series of events and a kind of peak and then what happens after that. So that narrative style to tell the story about it. And so usually we'll have a chance to kind of spend some time, first of all, talking about that, trying to brainstorm some different expressions, different stories. So if I have a shorter class, I'll do like one class where we're just talking about the stories, like think about this story, think about the times, and they might have several stories, and then choose one that you think would be a good one to look into in more depth and share with the class. And then writing it up is often another, depending how much time we have, another kind of lesson of looking in the written part of it in an integrated skills class. And then, yeah, and then doing the activity with it. Melvin, I think you have your hand. Oh, you're muted, I think.
I just realized that this semester I'm using a webtoon with most of my conversation classes, and it's called Yumi Cells, and it's about her brain cells and like her inner monologue and different things that are happening. And first I was just kind of thinking about like how that would work in general, like this type of activity. But yeah, like specifically with a lot of the episodes, she is assuming like her brain cells are interpreting the situation that she's in. And like the students we've been talking about how we react to what her brain cells are doing. But I just realized that the language structure that you offered here, how it makes it really easy for them to feel like they're speaking English effectively when they express these ideas, because they've been expressing their ideas, like they're really into it. I'm surprised. But if they use some of these templates, like they can just feel like I'm just naturally speaking English about what I'm thinking. And I'm not just kind of using the English that I know, like they have this vehicle to really get it out. So yeah, this is going to be really helpful for me. Thanks.
That's great. And I love that idea. I'm thinking like too, like, could they be a coach to her and like a conflict coach and say like, in this situation, you're thinking this, but have you considered A, B, C, D, and E as well? And, you could be responding in different ways. Like you could go a lot of places with that. That's really great. I like that. Any other comments or ideas to share? James, yeah.
I guess it kind of reminded me of also too, like, I think when Heidi was talking about like not even knowing if it's an intercultural conflict, and I was thinking like, I think a lot of times too, our assumptions, if we get into peers or people we perceive to be as peers, we tend to assume we have the same assumptions and the cultural assumptions. And I was thinking like, maybe it's also a way of pointing out that there may be intercultural conflicts and you don't think of them as intercultural conflicts. Like say, like a conference like this, where you have a lot of people from many different backgrounds, or even students that may come from different regions or different areas of the city, even where they don't think of them as cultural things until they talk, well, my family does this. And it's like, oh, wait a minute. Right. I don't know. Just a thought I had.
Definitely. Yeah. In intercultural conflict, two of the big problems are underestimating the role of culture or overestimating the role of culture. So finding that sweet spot in the middle of like, is this really a cultural issue, or is this just like our situation, or are we missing something that we could like look at from the lens of culture and really understand in a new way, for sure. Yeah. Lucinda.
I mean, like listening to everybody talk and like watching or thinking about the prompt you gave us, it made me realize that we actually do kind of overthink or assume a lot of things based on very little information. Like this case study, we don't know what's going on in the other person's head at all. And at first I was like, it doesn't seem like a really big deal, just that there's no reason to freak out. But then now I'm thinking like we actually do sort of create conflicts in our minds based on our own assumptions. Even if it's just this much information, we can create this whole narrative in our head of like, oh, well, he's ghosting me or he's mad at me for some reason. It could just be like he's just not on his phone that day.
Yeah. He's tired, he's having a sleep from being out in the rain and catching a cold.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. Right, exactly. Well, and this is like in conflict studies too, we talk about like the stages of conflict. The first stage of conflict is really just a problem that's emerged. And usually people are working at it and looking at the problem together and trying to solve it together. But as soon as it starts to escalate, then it becomes a problem with the other. And then in level 3, it starts to become more visible and our feelings start to come into it more. And usually the average person only recognizes that it's a conflict at level 3 or 4. It's like we don't even recognize it as a conflict until that point, even though we might have some feelings of discomfort, or we might be noticing like, oh, little red flag of something here, but I don't know what it is. So that, like in interpersonal conflict, paying attention to the earlier levels of conflict can be really helpful in preventing escalation of conflict and resolving it at the level where we just problem solve, right? And it's much easier linguistically to do problem solving than to do de-escalation of like violent conflict if you're way up there. Yeah, but that it is all in language, right? Like we're doing it all through language. We don't have any other tools to figure out what other people are thinking other than by communicating. Yeah. All right, well, we are just out of time. I want to make sure I share the resources here. So I have some of this stuff in the book that I've worked with. Some of you have seen that before. Barry Roberts, based in California, she has this book. It's a very short, very practical, hands-on book. Her website, the MSL Mediation, is there. Mediation as a second language. And yeah, so check out her stuff. Hopefully sometime in the future, I'll be able to invite her to co-TESOL things as well. And you'll have a chance to hear more of her stories. She's got a lot of rich experience as well. And yeah, a couple of other sources there. This, if you're interested in more conflict studies, this Beyond Intractability website is a really great one. It's a little bit, well, there's a range of ideas. There's kind of more introductory stuff and there's kind of higher level stuff too. A good variety of ideas. The Getting to Yes being the kind of like standard Western approach to negotiation, and then understanding that a lot of people who go through negotiation training all around the world use that book, and kind of understanding where people are coming from can be helpful as well. Yeah, and then the other references there. So that's about it. So if you have any other questions or comments, I'm happy to stick around, but I think that the time probably will be up soon if there's.
Yeah, and we will have another session in this room actually in 10 or so minutes, but can they contact you on Discord or
definitely I'm on Discord, yeah, and if email is easier for people, there's my email address as well. All
right, thank you, Cheryl, so much. That was really, really enlightening, and honestly I'm going to steal that activity. That's really good.
Do it and try it if you figure out how to get the